come from next door, moderating another panel, so I can't get enough. I'm back for some more. We're in for a real treat today to talk about a topic that I think will be discussed for quite some time. Why the UK and EU are missing the AI race. We only have 40 minutes, so this is going to be an interesting one. I'm joined by a very esteemed panel. I'm going to get them to introduce themselves. I'd like you to tell the audience who you are, where you're from and what you do, and what was the first thing you asked ChatGPT?
Thank you, Andrew. I'm Christian Reilly. I'm the field CTO for EMEA at Cloudflare. The first thing I asked ChatGPT, what is the fastest path to retirement?
I'm Karl Havard. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at NScale. And you tipped me off before coming on stage. I had to scroll back on my ChatGPT.
I did say make it up if you couldn't remember.
No, I won't make it up. But the first thing I asked was who would be the next manager of Leicester City?
Ah.
Did you get it right?
No. I think no one saw that one coming.
Very good. Dr. Lisa Cameron, I was an MP in the UK Parliament for 10 years. I'm now leading the UKUS Crypto Alliance. The first thing actually that I asked ChatGPT was, how do I write my book, The Accidental MP?
Paola?
So my name is Paola, and I basically come from Switzerland. I'm Swiss and Mexican, and that's why I'm not the typical Swiss. And I'm an innovation consultant, director of the Home of Blockchain. We support Switzerland on being a hub for digital technologies. I'm also involved in defense. I also consult innovation to one of the UN agencies and so on. And the first thing that I asked GPT, the thing is I had a ChatGPT 2. So
Early adopter.
A very early adopter. So it was more in philosophy. I was training him on philosophy. But then on the newest one, I asked, what's the best location for crypto companies? And it came Switzerland. And it's posted on LinkedIn. So if you go back in time, you will see it there. And
I should introduce myself. I'm Andrew Grill. I'm the Actionable Futurist. So I'm going to make sure that this panel gives you actionable insights before we go and leave today. I'm a futurist and I travel the world talking about AI and trying to demystify this technology. So hopefully we'll do some of that today. So let's start with a broader question. Are we in this race? Is it the right metaphor? Is it a race that we're in? Are there some special things about the UK and the EU that we will never see in other markets? But maybe start with you, Christian. Where do you think we are compared to the other big markets we'll talk about of the US and China? Where do we fit and how are we special, do you think?
Well, I think just to use the phrase race, I mean, I'm not sure it is a race. If we think about AI, we're in the third or fourth winter, depending on who you listen to. And I would say that, like in most technology, it's evolutionary. A race has an end by definition. When I look at my 30-odd years in the technology industry, I've seen various cycles of things, but I've never really seen, the end of anything, because I'm sure many of you out there who are in big companies are still dealing with legacy technologies from many, many years ago where there really hasn't been an end. So I'm not sure. I understand it because it helps people maybe contextualize the fact that everybody's running towards something, which is reasonable.
Or running away.
Or running away, yeah, in many cases. But so I think race, it doesn't work for me because, as a technologist, I look at it and I think, everything's going to be evolution. We've been waiting since the late 60s, early 70s for kind of where we are now with modern AI. So, that's a pretty long race in and of itself. I think if you look at kind of where we are from a UK perspective, I actually think we've got a lot of advantages in the UK. If you look around, we've got ARM, for example, so people always talk about NVIDIA, and if you can't get NVIDIA GPUs, you're going to be last in the race. Well, the reality is that we have some fantastic technology companies here in the UK. We have a lot of investment coming into the UK. With my hometown of Manchester, we have the Turing Institute. We all know Turing's relationship with AI. So, I think we're in a pretty good position here. When you look at the US, it's hard not to be in awe of places like the US and China just because they have so much access to capital, access to investment. And if you look at what's happening kind of in the US, they're now going through a sort of a second early phase of building as many data center and semiconductor factories as they can, which puts them in a race with China, absolutely, with great certainty. But, we're a little island, right? But we're also a very popular little island. There's a lot of things that we can bring. So yeah, I mean, we can't compare ourselves with the US and China, I don't think. But I certainly wouldn't say that we're a poor fellow. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us. There's a lot to do. I think we're currently the third biggest AI economy in the world, if you believe the stats. So Yeah, race doesn't quite do it for me. I think, like all things, the way that technology evolves and the way that it's implemented and the way that it's adopted, I think we're actually in a really good position, and hopefully some of the things we'll talk about relative to where the government stands on that will help us contextualise that more.
Karl, race, end, finish?
Yeah, I don't think I agree actually. There's no end, but there is a posturing going on as a status thing in play, isn't there? About how many gigawatts can you build and how fast can you do that, and how many billions are you going to invest, et cetera, et cetera. And I think because we see the US being probably the home of the development of the technology here, even though the supply chain comes from other global sources. The fact that they act faster sort of gives this, I know the previous panel was about FOMO, it gives the impetus of we need to do something, and therefore the rest of the world, China to one side, is deemed to be in this game of catch-up. But I think in Europe and the UK, again, I agree with Christian about we're in a slightly different position. And we're probably being a little bit more thoughtful about it, on how we deploy, the ethics behind it, the sustainability angles behind AI. So agree that we can reach a really good place soon, but there is lethargy in our region compared to other regions. So, yeah.
Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, I want to see the UK at the races. I mean, I don't want to see us left behind. So I feel like whether you use the terminology race or not, there is a progression forward, and we need to be there. We can't be left at the station. I'm very keen that the UK looks to see what's happening in the US in terms of the regulatory framework that's being developed, and uses, I suppose, whether you liked it or not at the time, but a Brexit dividend, that we can have our own regulatory framework now, that we can have light touch regulation, hopefully make the UK very competitive globally, and help the government's overall agenda of growth moving forward. I think this sector has a huge amount to contribute. I think we need to reformulate our education system as well to give our young people the opportunities to participate and achieve their potential. And there's a huge amount of work to be done. So yeah, I think there's a momentum that we need to progress in the Parliament to take this forward.
Paola?
I think, yes, we are on a different path, Europe as a race. And one of the problems we have is we are really fragmented. We are talking the UK, Europe, and Switzerland. And I mean, the UK and Switzerland, we are flexible on the innovation side. Switzerland is very pragmatic. You can discuss directly with the authorities on your project. But what we think, I think a problem we have in Europe, again, as a whole, is that we don't believe in what we are building. So there's venture capital for startups, but when is it time to really get serious and scale? Where is it? It's in the US. So I mean, in Switzerland, we have really, like in UK and Europe, we have super big brains and ideas. And then they come, the Americans, I mean, with all respect to the Americans here, they come and they buy us on the cheap side. And then they scale. I mean, I assume everybody, most of you have an iPhone, and you have used the image recognition algorithm that it has. It was developed in Zurich. So I mean, and then they bought it, and then they expanded, and now it's the most used tool. So they bought it on the cheap. City also was developed in Switzerland. Okay, it's not great, but because they bought it, never developed until now, but the origin is from Switzerland. And I think this is a different race, and this is one of the topics we have to talk. And education is obviously, I mean, the Middle East is heavily investing in education. China, we don't have to say it. So I mean, yeah, we are racing on that side, catching up, but we should look where the wind is blowing, not just follow up other countries.
We saw some announcements only yesterday in the Middle East where there are hundreds of billions of dollars being invested in AI. They want to win the race if it is a race. I want to unpack sort of three areas that were discussed there. One is opportunities, secondly is regulation, the third one's education. Just on the opportunities, a few months ago we saw the current government publish the AI Opportunities Action Plan. There were 50 recommendations. My view is that 50 is a lot, and any government would be pressed to get all of them. But Karl, there's sort of some that pop out that you think are more urgent than others.
Yeah, I mean, it was Jan 13th because I was in the room when it was announced, and pleased to say NScale were mentioned actually in the speech.
Well, you might want to expand on that as well, what you're doing.
Yeah, so, and it plays to one of the points which Matt Clifford put in his action plan, which was towards the end, but probably one I think is most important, and that's about sovereignty. So, to your point, US hyperscalers are coming in. I think the UK government, 2/3 of its IT estate is based upon public cloud. We have Donald Trump in power. We have the ability for him to call the Cloud First Act and all those sorts of things. So people are now turning inwards across Europe and the UK to look at sovereignty. How can we retain control of our, not just our own data, but not be subject to the laws of a foreign land? And therefore, what we have done at NScale, we're now 2 years old, we've in our Series B, but we've got some really good solid investment, is we are building out a UK and EU sovereign capability. So building data centers, excuse me, buying the NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, ARM equipment, and then putting it in the data centers and then offering it out as a service to commercial enterprises, but also UK government departments. And I think the sovereignty angle, not really fully understood by many commercial enterprises or governments, but what we're saying is, if together in partnership with the government, you can believe that we can build a UK AI hyperscaler, then as well as all the ownership and the legislation, this will directly boost the UK economy as well. The money will stay within the UK. It won't touch the UK and then end up in the bank account of a foreign land.
Christian, some highlights from the action plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think, is anybody familiar with the action plan?
You need to read it, at least to know what the 50 things are. Yeah.
You know, it's actually, and I'm going to be careful here because the accidental MP is within striking distance, but I think it's one of the best things that I've seen come from government in a long time. What I would say, even though there's 50 things, they are grouped in quite a logical way. The only thing that the thing's missing, in my opinion, is kind of like the implementation and what's more important from a priority perspective. There's a couple of things that I think are really important and maybe speaks to kind of where we are now in this AI journey. The first one is about data sets. So it talks a lot about how can we make data better available, not just what we've currently got, but how can we think about, as we create data, making that creation of data with kind of models in mind. And I'm paraphrasing the pieces in the document there. You know, obviously, data is the lifeblood of current AI, so there's all sorts of counter arguments and for arguments against copyrighted data or not copyrighted data or data that wasn't created by people who are using the model and training the models. That's kind of an interesting hump that I think we need to get over. But there's a lot in there about data, and obviously that's going to be super critical. The other one, which I think is interesting, is around the education piece that we talked about. And I'll give you a personal anecdote here. So my eldest daughter is currently at university in South Korea. So she's at Yonsei in Seoul. She's doing nothing to do with technology, yet she has an AI module in her course that is absolutely 100% that she has to do and commit to keep her GPA up. So that's a really interesting thing, just what's happening in somewhere else in the world. My son is in his second year of his A-levels, and one of those A-levels is computer science, and he's currently not doing anything to do with AI whatsoever. There's not even an AI conversation in the curriculum. So I think from an education point of view, and if you sort of think about where we're going to head in the future, the way I think about this is that if we focus purely on STEM and we continue to do what we've done, in my opinion, which is to marginalize opportunities for students who may not naturally be STEM biased, but could bring something to that, I think we're going to be in a world of hurt as a country in a few years' time. So what I'd really like to see is a focus on that education. How do we bring this down right the way down to some of the early years levels, and not just giving people an iPad and getting them to move shapes around, but to bring that in fundamentally to understand how we can attract non-STEM native people into the many opportunities that we're going to see in this place. And I think there's a lot there from industry to consider. I'm hopeful that we'll see more and more of the apprenticeship schemes focus on that, because I think we're miles behind as a country. If you look at other countries in Europe, we don't have that divide between I'm going to go to academia or I'm going to go technology, which is the German model and has been the German model for a very long time. So I think there's lots we can do there, and again, within the 50 points, there's a huge emphasis on education. To me, it's too far biased to higher education, so I'd like to see that come down a few levels.
Lisa, you used to be in the machine that makes these things. What's your view on that? And then pick up on the education piece, maybe.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it should be from nursery, primary education, and actually travelling with Parliament over the last few years, I've seen this in other countries. It's already established. It's native to children to be digital. And actually, our young people are very naturally engaged anyway. We had the Children's Parliament come to speak to us about emerging technology, and we had the children in the room, aged from 9 to 15, the MPs, the members of the House of Lords, and one of the first questions was, who understands or has heard of Web3? All the kids, hands up in the air. Hardly any MPs, hands in the air, no members of the House of Lords.
With what Web meant, Web3.
So, actually in many ways, this generation is very digitally native. But I think in terms of, jobs of the future, even what jobs will look like, there's going to have to not just be a focus on education. I think it's a whole cabinet actually response that has to happen. There's going to have to be looking at scaling our businesses from small businesses right the way up to ensure that this is incorporated into their systems, that they know what they're doing. We need to retrain people whose jobs might perhaps be taken over by AI. So this needs to be a whole government approach. But I think that the plan is a great start, and I feel, again, as was said, the implementation is going to be really crucial too.
Paola, where you sit, I'm going to talk about regulation in a minute, but the EU AI Act is something that the EU have done, but they haven't, from what I've seen, done an equivalent Opportunities Action Plan. What do you see where you sit looking back into the UK, and what do you think we should do, the EU's doing, and vice versa?
I mean, I can talk about the Swiss perspective. I mean, I think the UK and the Swiss are on the best way because we are in the middle. Like, we have regulations, but not like restrictions that you could think like 300 pages from the European AI Act and fines of 7% of the annual revenue if you don't comply. I think that Switzerland, UK, we should work more together into these exchanges and then deploy worldwide. And yeah, I think I'm starting a new startup with AI on sustainability, and when I think, do I have to read 300 pages? I mean, we are 2 people. And we have this Spotify moment, is we are not going to hire anybody until really we see that we need one. So no, I think that has to be some flexibility. Yes, I mean, there are 4 categories in the European Act, but I mean, we have to think also on the end user, which would be basically the producer of these startups, these companies, that we have to think on that, be more flexible.
So regulation, is that holding us back? I mean, it's interesting, OpenAI launched their video generation model Sora in the rest of the world, and only recently could use it here in the UK because of restrictions based on the Act. So are we limiting our opportunity from over-regulation?
I think so, but the thing is, what I like of the US approach is, while Europe is discussing, the US is acting. And how they're doing, we are regulating here, and the US is standardizing the stuff. So let's take, I mean, one of my issues that I want everybody to know that you should worry about quantum. And for example, now the US had passed this NIST post-quantum regulation, the standardization, so 250,000 organizations in the US have to take it. So when they were evaluating which algorithms, they started with 90 algorithms, and in the end they selected 4. These 4 algorithms are not US made, these are Swiss made. They were done just outside of Zurich, in Ruschlikon, in the IBM Quantum Center. So I mean, we have the brains of what they're doing is, they say, you want to do business with us in the US? These are the standards. So maybe it's something that we should be doing instead of regulating and discussing, just acting.
Christian, you're a global company. You have fingers in many pies. What does the world think of what the EU and the UK are doing compared to other regions when it comes to AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a global perspective, I mean, just to give you the benefit of my many engagements with some of the big companies that we have, I would say that there's kind of maybe there's 3 things that I see happening. One is the adoption of what I would call kind of intrinsic AI. And by that, I mean things like Microsoft Copilot. So anybody using Copilot in their organizations? Yeah, it's super common.
Only 4 hands went up.
Yeah.
Sorry. Let's just have hands up again.
Okay, let me try that. And anybody using Google Gemini AI as well? There we go. So we can see we've got more Google people.
Just checking,
so, yeah, it's always nice to see more Google than Microsoft people. Am I allowed to say that? Yeah.
It's a free world.
Okay. The second one is within kind of, let me call it AI-driven pair programming. So if anybody's in development, we see a lot of that, although I would say that I haven't yet seen fully autonomous coding go into production, so definitely not something I've seen. And then kind of the third element of that is really what I would say is very early trials of how can we bring AI to productivity within our organization? And to go back to what I said before about everything's evolutionary, and kind of when you've been in this industry a long time, you get a little bit jaded and you kind of say, well, we've seen this before. So anybody do RPA years ago? Yeah. Yeah. So
explain what RPA is.
Oh, sorry, robotic process automation. So for decades, we've been looking for the magic bullet or the silver bullet, whatever you call it, for individual productivity. So it's very natural that we lean towards that as organizations to try and take away some of the cognitive load from individuals that actually helps individuals to do what they're really good at, which is the critical thinking, the emotional reasoning, the things that humans do really, really well. So it's not like we're suddenly saying, we've seen this huge trend and it's all different. The implementation of it is different, but I certainly think the goals and what we see globally in the conversations we have. Lots of companies are kicking the tires on different models. Lots of companies worried about, what is that foundational model? I want to know whether it's open source. I want to know whether it's open weight. I'm putting some guardrails in place. I'm putting the things in that you would kind of expect. I'm going to do validating my prompt responses, just basic hygiene. And again, this is nothing new because every time we've implemented technology in enterprise, we've always brought security and process around it just to make sure that it doesn't kind of cut loose. The things that we see are kind of that very same model. So lots of interest. Would I say it's, past the 50% of everybody going AI? Absolutely not.
I talked in the other panel about the AI-first directives from CEOs of Shopify and Duolingo only a couple of weeks ago, which I think are a little bit dangerous because they're probably quite AI-native CEOs and telling everyone they must do AI and you can't have any more headcount unless you basically can prove that AI can do it more effectively. Where is that going to impact things as more companies saying we're doing AI? And coming back to the training thing, everyone else going, but I'm still grappling with a prompt on ChatGPT. Lisa, maybe your view on where we need to get people comfortable with the technology before we just mandate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're doing a huge amount of work still in the Parliament on our own education and education for the new group of MPs who have arrived. And, MPs are a bit like general practitioners. They tend to know a little bit about lots of things and speak on lots of different things. But this sector actually and emerging tech, you do need to know a bit about it before you go into the chamber in order to have an informed position and create what works legislation. So bringing people together. Next week I'm in Madrid and we're bringing together 60 legislators from different countries in the Senate there, and then we'll be in the European Parliament in June, and I'm bringing some people from the US administration to the House of Lords in June as well to speak to MPs to kind of talk about what's happening, because again, I think as companies, we need to, people need to be progressing, but legislators as well need to know that this is global. You can't sit in your own bubble and not know what's happening in other parts of the world. And actually, hopefully, the more we can bring people together and legislators and regulators together, the more we can look at some shared standards and interoperability as well.
So the challenge for me has always been, when you look at legislators that are grappling with a technology that is moving so quickly, some would say exponentially, how can legislators possibly catch up? And does that mean they have to have a wider aperture to basically say, we can't prescriptively legislate to say you have to use ChatGPT 3.474, but basically don't do harm, don't be evil. Where is AI and new technology legislation going to have to go to be more fit for purpose? Paola?
I mean, maybe we look into, again, to the Swiss approach. So in many countries you have from top down comes what is the strategy of the country. In Switzerland we don't have that. Basically it's a grassroots development. We are like a decentralized country. So we have different cantons, everybody does their own thing, and we learn from each other. So we have now the city of Ticino, which wants to be the most crypto-friendly city. The other ones are looking to see, shall we catch up, or we just let them fail or succeed? And this is something that makes the government very approachable and pragmatic, because the ideas come from us. And the discussions, we have tons of public-private partnerships, associations, and then the discussions like that. So everyone knows, most likely, that the Crypto Valley is in Switzerland. How it happened? They saw that there was this new technology, Ethereum was there, and they're like, what is this? And then decided two of our ministers at the time, together with some people from academia, some businessmen, they went to Zug, and they sit down, it's like, tell us, what is this blockchain? What is it about? What do we need to do to help flourish? What do you need, and so on. And this was the start. So I mean, we also need these conversations. I also see this sometimes in Switzerland. We have also people discussing AI, and then I see a lawyer. I was like, where are the companies? We need to be like, have end user, we need to have the companies, and we have to have the government involved together in order to move.
And you know, when I took over as chair in 2021 of the all-party group on crypto, and at that point there had been no debates in the House of Commons at all, and that's relatively recently, but we managed to up that to over 250 engagements on the sector and on emerging tech and blockchain. The first thing that happened was the wonderful ambassador from Switzerland took me to Zug and said, you can have some education here, you can learn from our legislators. And I think that's why it's so important for legislators to come together and support each other on this journey. And that's when I thought, actually, I don't have to know absolutely everything about technology. I have to be more of a facilitator, an enabler, and collaborator here. And that's my job. And I just have to kind of be wanting and willing to listen and learn and find out where the stumbling blocks are and the challenges for the UK and the work that we were doing at the time, and to try and help overcome those and raise them to the correct ministers. So it's about, I think, industry working with legislators and making sure that everybody's voice is heard and that we support each other.
Just a very, very quick note on that. Based on that, what we did in Switzerland was like not start, and what we are mentioning crypto is because there are lessons learned on that, on finance and so on, regulation. But what was important and made us, Switzerland, move very fast is we didn't start new laws from zero. We said, okay, what are the set of rules that might apply, make just an adaptation, and that's it. And this has been done for AI now.
Can I offer opinion on legislation? It obviously varies on the process of how we instigate legislative processes by region and by territory, by government, by philosophy as well. And I think legislation has always been the inhibitor, dare I say. It's absolutely necessary, but it inhibits innovation. And I think that was the big criticism of the EUA Act. And I think there's a page for every single day of the year. That's how long it is. Because you've got several different countries coming together, trying, all with the right intent in mind, but also think about their own personal needs also. And then you've got the likes of the US with the new leadership there, China, said, right, we're just going to do this. And the Middle East is also now starting to do things. So there's an element here of the balance between legislation and risk. And I think where the EU and, dare I say, the UK government, and having worked with them very closely the last 9 months, it's that risk element. And I think the title of the session is, Are We Missing the Boat? I think that appetite to mitigate risk is maybe what's slowing us down. If we can cut through that, we've got the talent, we've got the investment, we've got the skills, all that good stuff. It's just that element of, what if we didn't do this right, which is holding us back.
Because we're so worried that we do something wrong. You know, in the US, if you fail or you do something wrong, everyone thinks that's great, you've learned, and move on, and you're going to be a success in the future. And here we kind of teach children, and you know, from an early education point of view, oh my God, if you failed, that means you shouldn't ever try that again. And I think for emerging technology, being inquisitive, picking yourself up again, trying things and exploring and doing things, obviously within a risk framework, but I don't think we should be too risk averse here either, or it will stifle innovation.
Curiosity is key. I wrote a book called Digitally Curious because I want people to be curious. Just picking up on something that you said, Karl, you said we've got the talent. I would argue that where we are in the world, does that mean we're limited in terms of the talent available? Because if I go and work for OpenAI or Google, I can earn multiples more. Are we finding a limitation on access to talent, or do you think we're okay?
Interesting. We've just been through a massive growth spurt and hired people out of Google and the like. But when I said we have the talent, we've got, in the UK, good, strong British talent. Always have had that heritage, actually. But we've had a talent drain. It's the hyperscalers and the big organisation tech companies which will attract that talent and bring it over to the other territories. Even at Oxford University last week, their PhD students in the AI space all have in their contract the ability to do 30 to 60 days of external consultancy. Guess who's picking them up? Meta, Google, etc. So yeah, we need to do something to keep.
Christian, how are you finding at Cloudflare the war on talent, or the talent on war?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's to the same point Karl made. It's definitely getting more difficult to attract talent. But I'll caveat that by saying I had a conversation with our head of HR recently, and they made an.
That's not always good.
No, actually, it was the first time because I'd not done nothing wrong, which was the first. Her comment was the candidates are interviewing us. And I had to sort of sit and think what that meant for a minute, because, you know, the world I came from, you would, you know, apply for a role and maybe you'd get it or whatever. But this was about something very different, that the talent is not necessarily heading to, and I don't want to contradict Karl here, but it's not always heading to the FANG companies anymore, because there's a different requirement from that talent. It can be around corporate and social governance. It can be around the mission of the company. It can be around environmental impacts. It can be about the betterment of the world. And, you know, that might sound like a really woke statement, but it's true. And so, you know, the conversations we have with talent now, it's not necessarily always about, you know, how can I get the most money and how can I go and, you know, arbitrage between different companies to get the most money. It's really important to what the mission of the organization is. And I think if that's a trend that we continue to see, responsible AI and what that means to industry and the world, I think is going to be the thing that attracts a lot of that top talent.
So in the minutes we have left, I want each of you to give me the elevator pitch as to why companies, people should invest, work, design, develop, innovate in the EU and the UK. Start with you, Paola.
Oh, well, I'll talk about Switzerland.
Give me the elevator pitch.
No, I mean, we need to work more together. I mean, as I've mentioned, Switzerland, we don't have the problem with talent. So we are in the top ranks and so on. That's why we have the biggest research center from Google after the US is in Switzerland. And then is Poland. Poland is also brilliant people. I mean, I think everywhere, but I mean, this shows that we have OpenAI, we have Anthropic. I mean, we don't have a problem with talent in Switzerland. So I think we need to work more together. As I say, with the UK, I have some friends of the Swiss embassy here, if you want to know more details. Natalie is over there, Mark is around. And so let's work together, and with Europe as well to become more agile. But I mean, really, this fragmentation, we need to look at the market of Europe and maybe look at the South American market, the Mexican side. I'm from North America, but we need to look at other markets and start thinking on quantum. We can discuss outside, but this is something that passions me. And yeah, we should start run on the AI, and then the quantum is on parallel, so be worried.
Lisa, give us your pitch.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have some of the best talent in universities in the world. We have a fantastic legal system, which can offer great clarity. We need to get light touch regulation in place, in my opinion, that enables the innovators to stay here and to scale up. And we need government to look at how to help scale in the UK and make sure that talent stays. I think much talent starts here. I think our task is keeping talent here and actually encouraging talent to come from elsewhere to the UK as well. I mean, we took the MPs to Lucerne, to the Blockchain Academy there with Polkadot. We gave them their certificates at the end, and whether they'd passed or failed,
Who doesn't love a certificate?
I know, exactly. No, but this was interesting for me because the founder of Polkadot, Gavin Wood's from north of England. And so we actually have quite a lot already to be proud of, but we somehow let other jurisdictions claim that they have been at the forefront of this from the start, when actually we've already been there, and I think we need to shout about that much more as well.
If you want to see British innovation, go to Bletchley Park, the museum, and see where it all began, and watch the Imitation Game. Then you realise why we led all this. Karl, what's your pitch?
It's more of a request, and it's two things, and that is, the first one is belief, and that for the EU and the UK to actually genuinely believe that we can actually be a player in this space, because we can. The second thing is, and this is to the governments, the cost of energy. Everything to do with AI resides on the infrastructure that supports it, and that infrastructure draws a lot of power from not just the grid, but obviously renewable energy sources. We need the EU and the UK to ensure that this is housed in clean energy locations, and the price of that energy is brought down to be competitive with other parts of the world.
Interestingly, 3 Mile Island plant is being reopened in a couple of years by Microsoft because they need access to clean energy that they don't have available. Final thoughts from you, Christian, on your pitch as to why here?
Yeah, I think if you forget the Brexit thing for a moment and you just think about the EU and the UK as a sort of a land mass, even though we're sort of an island, but we've got access to some of the best talent. I was very fortunate in my former life to have a centre of excellence in Romania. Some of the best talent I've ever seen, Cluj-Napoca in Romania as an example. Their access to talent is good. The labour rates compared to other parts of the world are also very good. And a small pitch for Manchester. You know, we've seen a lot of investment in Manchester. We'll continue to see that. You know, we saw that with BBC, we saw it with ITV, we saw it with Media City in Manchester. We'll continue to see that through the Turing Institute. We have a lot of history in Manchester, a lot of fantastic talent in and around Manchester. And if we think about that in the context of what could be the northern powerhouse, of course, I don't think it'll be long before we see some gigantic data centres built in that part of the country, powered by small modular nuclear reactors, which is incredibly clean energy, incredibly high throughput, and incredibly cost effective. So, and I can vouch for the weather in Manchester. The last 2 weeks has been fantastic.
So in summary, we're in a race. I don't think there's any clear winner at the moment, but we're in it to win it. If there's a winning in there, we're playing the game. I want to thank the panel for their attention. I'm Andrew Grill, I'm the Actionable Futurist. Digitally Curious is worth a read. I'm here all day. Enjoy the rest of your morning and afternoon. Thank you very much, the panel.